Beautiful. Okay, well, look, today, let me just kick off doing the normal thing of sharing this screen. And I'll just go to share here. And then quickly go up here. Just wait for 2 seconds. All right, so you should all be seeing a big sign that says decisions. Marvelous. So I'm here to talk about decisions today and in our church, and particularly within our present context that we find ourselves in. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to think back. Not so long ago, we were all just so mightily relieved when 2020 became 2021. I mean, honestly, as we came out of 2020, the world just went crazy for a while there as COVID sort of came, and we're all just saying, man, we can't wait for 2021 to get this all behind us. Now, I don't think many of us at that stage, as we sort of left 2020 coming into the beginning of this year, not many of us would have sort of predicted we'd be in the current predicament of actually being locked down in Newcastle. So we're all meeting via Zoom instead of in church. But I just want to remind you that we probably should have suspected that 2021 was going to have a few little issues, because Mad Max was actually set in 2021. And so George Miller, when he wrote the screenplay for this movie, knew 2021 was going to be one of these years. But we all know, guys, don't we? Like, it's sort of been 2021 is really now just being defined by COVID and the impact that it's having on our society. And so, we're getting very used to seeing signs, like social distance if you're allowed out. I love the fact that only in Australia do you get told to stay as far apart as an adult kangaroo. When I showed my brother that in America, he just couldn't wait to show all his friends. But obviously, we're in the situation where most things are closed. When you look at pictures of Sydney, you get this sort of stuff, which is just amazing. Now, I don't know about you, but I looked down there, and while I felt sorry for them, like I have a sister that lives in Sydney and nieces and nephews and everything else, I felt sorry for them, but I didn't really care that much because it wasn't us. Then suddenly we find out the Hunter is in lockdown. Then that was okay. I thought, well, we can do our bit. But then, of course, we've now found the lockdown's been extended. So whether we like it or not, we're all sitting here now in our little home bubbles where we effectively can't have people over. You can't go and visit, you all know the rules. And, I suppose the luckiest person on the planet sitting downstairs on my iPad, and that's Deborah, because she gets to spend the lockdown with me. But I'm looking at the screen and I'm looking at the other people and I'm thinking, poor Angela being stuck in that room with Ross all day, every day. And I won't go through her name, everyone in person. And, I talked to the guy next door, and he's got 2 kids he's trying to homeschool, and he works for New South Wales Health. So he's not a practiced educator, and it's just the whole situation is just driving him crazy. Now, during this whole time, there's a whole heap of decisions that we have to make. And decisions, we know, we go this way or that way. I think most people, we know very much when it comes to making decisions of any form, there is a hierarchy. And so we know Maslow's hierarchy sort of says, hey, we tend to sort of make sure the bottom stuff's taken care of before we move up the triangle. And, we want all our physiological needs to be met, air, water, food. It was interesting when the lockdown was announced. The queue, when I drove through Warners Bay, there was a queue that was probably 200 metres long waiting to get into Aldi. And you've got to say, that sort of panic reaction had a lot to do with people wanting to stock up and to make sure that their basic physiological needs were going to be met. But then also we're feeling a bit destabilised because, suddenly our personal security and safety is being called into question. As we go up, we've been further destabilised because we're used to being in communities where we sort of are loved and we get to love and we belong, and suddenly we can't have that sort of intimacy of personal contact like we once had. And so certainly I can see why COVID and lockdowns can be quite destabilising for people. Then, of course, we've got all these other sort of decisions that we need to make. And, and we know there's sort of consequences to some of these things. I mean, should you go and get tested if you have a runny nose? When is it that we should head off. Should you have the vaccine? And then if you're going to have a vaccine, which one should you have? Like, should you be having AstraZeneca now, or should you be waiting for Pfizer and the rollout, even if it means you can't get the vaccine to November? You know, what do you do in the lockdown while you are isolating? And I saw this and immediately thought of Kendall, and he's probably doing all sorts of things. What I want to know is this: does our faith help with these decisions? Does our Christian faith help with our COVID-related decisions? That's my question for you. And we're going to flick into breakout rooms. So Bob's going to do that. And the way this works is that you'll just be assigned a group, and you're probably going to have 4 or 5 people in your group. I want you to chat about this. So I'm not 100% sure whoever is controlling the whole thing, you might have to unmute everyone and go in the breakout rooms. We'll give you 5 minutes. And then Bob, in 5 minutes time, just hit stop on the breakout rooms, and then everyone will be given 1 minute's notice and they'll all come back. Everyone got that? All right, Bob, over to you.
Yep.
We're all live. Hello.
All right. Did it, can anyone hear me? For whatever reason, I'm just locked in my presentation. Let me try and get out of this. Hey, Bob, can you hit stop share on yours or not?
Not on mine. Stop sharing for you.
Okay, so it seems to me that we must be in a breakout room, Bob.
Yep.
And what we've got here is that I'm in it twice because Deborah's downstairs on my iPad, and you've got and my other computer's here so I can see what's going on. So it's actually you and me and Brenda is in and Charlie media team. You there, Brenda? Oh, she's not listening. So Bob, you tell me, do you think our faith helps with the decisions?
I think so. The fact that we can't see what's going on, we're being told what's going on, and I think the issue of peace is the
just set up. All right. Okay, can people hear me? Can you hear me, Bob? Okay, beauty. So, guys, we had our breakout room then, and no doubt you had a little bit of a chat. What I'd be interested to know is, now for whatever reason, I can't, jumping into that breakout room, I can't actually get out of my presentation here, so I can't get to see you all. But those people I can see on the screen, I can see about 6 or 7. I'd like to give you to give a simple yes or no. Thank you. Now I can see you all. I'd like you to just give a simple yes or no, and that is, do you think your Christian faith helps you make the decisions, particularly COVID decisions? Now, right now, I can actually see probably about 20 computers on the screen. So I want you to either go, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. All right, so let's everyone go. I want a yes or a no. Do you think it helps or not? Well, so far, thank you for that. So far, I want to report to you, you can all see each other, no doubt, but I'm reporting a 100% yes, it helps. Well, good. The Raymonds are a dissenting voice. You've got to be careful of those Raymonds. So we got a 1 no, and everybody else is a yes. I'm here, guys, to let you know, I think we need to think about this carefully. This is not actually a flippant question. And I think as Christians, as it happened in the breakout room, Bob and I ended up being in the room with 3 of my computers. And so we had quite a good chat, the 2 of us. And we talked about the fact that there is an element of Christianity that actually you got to say is interpreting things as a loopy fringe. And what we've got to do when we ask ourselves, does our Christianity help? In many ways, it really is a matter of saying, well, how does it help? How does it actually work? So what I'm going to do is just very quickly go back now to sharing my screen. And here we go again. Okay, so beautiful. So how does it actually help? Because I want you to know is that I actually think that there's good and bad when it comes to the way that Christianity can impact COVID-related decisions. And let me explain what I mean. We know very carefully that in the Bible, Jesus calls himself, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He, on numerous occasions, tells us we should be seeking truth. We should be seeking him, and we should be seeking what's actually going on in the world. And to do that, I think what we've got to do is that we actually have to learn to think quite critically. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is Romans 12:2, and I put it on the screen for you all. It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is. You'll be able to test God's will. What Paul's saying here is that, hey, we shouldn't be just lulled into thinking like everybody else. What we should be doing is using our faith to transform our mind and actually test what is going on, test what God's will is. And one of the problems that we have, not just Christians, but everyone, is that we all struggle with this idea of confirmation bias. Now, confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information in a way that supports what you already believe. So when it comes to the idea of us being in a COVID world, which is quite strange for us, when we start trying to work out what's going on, when we're trying to make decisions, we are absolutely flooded with information through the media. I know that, one of the things I do is that I go to Facebook and look at Greg Piper's Facebook page because it's the most reliable source of information I know. But you can listen to all the news, you can listen to all this different stuff, and you're flooded. And what happens is that we find out there's all this information that comes our way, the objective facts, let's call them. And then what we have is all that, we have a whole section of stuff that supports what we already believe. So we tend to pay attention to the intersection of those two things in that we ignore a whole heap of the facts and we just tend to support and acknowledge the stuff that actually confirms what we already believe. So the way this works is that we all end up viewing the world through our worldview, a particular set of lenses. And what we do is, if I guess become a little bit of psychology 101, as information comes into us, we actually process that information based on what we already believe, based on what we already know. Our existing cognitive structure, our schema, helps us to make sense of new information that comes our way. Now, because of this, I just want to put a couple of things out there I think we've got to be careful of as Christians. The first thing is, have we got the right information coming in? Have we got the right information coming in? In this structure here, you've got the incoming experience on the bottom. Is that data right? Because one, it's very hard to make good decisions if you've actually got poor data coming in. And let me give me an example of this. I keep a marine fish tank. It's out at Avondale College. This isn't it because I haven't got a photo of it, but this is a beautiful reef tank in Sydney. Mine will look like that one day. What I do is very important that the salinity of this water is kept perfect, the same as the ocean. So it's a specific gravity of 1.026. So I was using a device like this, which is an optical refractometer, and you put a couple of drops of water down on the blue bit on the end, you close the lid, then you look through it, and it actually tells you what the salinity of the water is. And I had the salinity just perfect, and I was testing it. I tested it every week, but I noticed that a couple of the corals weren't starting to look that great. And then I was testing it. I couldn't work out what was going on. And then I found out that the actual refractometer was broken and was giving me an incorrect reading. So what I was doing is I was doing stuff to the tank, thinking I was doing the right thing, but because the information I was basing my decisions on, you know what was killing my coral? Me. What I did is that I went out and spent $160 and bought one of these. Now what this is a digital refractometer. So that little well on the right there, I just put a mill of water in there, turn it on, and it reads it, and it tells me exactly to 3 decimal places what's going on. And I've tested this and calibrated it, and I know it's right. And, you know, I've had this now for about a month. And now that I've corrected all my mistakes, my corals are starting to grow perfectly again. So what I can tell you is that when you're trying to make decisions, if you've got the wrong data coming in from the bottom, you're never going to be able to make a good decision. So what we need to do is seek truth. And we've got to say, how can we actually get that good information coming in? What can we actually attend to make sure that the input is accurate? Secondly, you've got to be able to process it correctly. You've got to be able to make sense of what's going on. I want you to look at these pictures. This, a dog cut in half. This, a woman sort of floating on a levitating mat. Or this. Now, looking at that, I'd like to know, is the train coming out or going into the tunnel? So what I might do here, it just goes stop share for a minute. So what I'd like you to do is to go like this if it's coming out of the tunnel, or go like that if it's going into the tunnel. So let me know. Who thinks it's coming out of the tunnel? This way? Who thinks it's going into the tunnel? Who is like this, saw it coming out of the tunnel for a bit and then going into the tunnel? You know what? Most of you. I could see it coming in both ways. So the point is, if you're looking at that information, how do you actually make sense of something that's just so conflicting and changing all the time? Let me go back to my slideshow. All right, just have to bear with me for 2 seconds. My computer's just having a little wobbly here. All right, sorry about that. So it's very difficult to make decisions when the information seems to be confounded. What we do, if you look at this picture that you look at and just think what's going on here, when you zoom in, you actually get to see this isn't a dog cut in half, it's actually a dog lying by a log. Or when you look at this photo here of this woman who's levitating on her mat on the beach, you actually zoom in and you find out she's actually standing on a platform on the sand, and it's just the shadow of the flag that's in front of her that makes it look like she's levitating when you quickly look at it. So what I can tell you now, that if you're trying to make good decisions, it's no point just glancing at something. You've got to properly understand what's going on to be in a situation to make the best call. And, you know, and sometimes it's difficult, because what happens, if I can just go back to 101 psychology again, if we've got new information coming in, we've got the cylinder that we want to come up and fit into our schema, what we already know. As we bring it up, there's 2 ways that thing can fit. We've got to either assimilate the information, that is, turn it around and view it in such a way that we can get it to fit into the hole we have in our schema. Or what we have to do is actually change the shape of our schema so that thing can come up and sit in, and that's called accommodation. What I can tell you is that both of these processes take effort, and that's not something that's lightly done. So when you're talking about making decisions, particularly under times of COVID, the question I've got is, have you actively pursued the truth? You know, have you expended effort in making decisions where you really thought about things carefully and considered them well, instead of just having sort of like a knee-jerk response? Because when Paul's talking in Romans, He's talking about renewing of your mind, which is a process from psychology we know is something that takes effort. It is not a passive experience. It's active rather than passive. So I think that the first thing is that when we are people of faith, and I'm proud to be a Christian, when we start making decisions, we've got to say, is all right, what we can't do is just assume a whole lot of things. What we've got to do is be quite critical, and that's a positive thing. Be critical as we consider what's going on and examine things from all sides. You see, it's not always easy to do this. See here, I have a 4 cards, A, Q, 4, and 7. Now, I don't know if you can read the top. Yeah, yes, I can read it on my other computer. It says there, if you've given a set of 4 cards and given a hypothesis, if the card has a vowel on one side, then it must have an even number on the other. You've got that? If it's a vowel on one side, it's an even number on the other. To determine that if that hypothesis is false, which 2 cards would you turn over? You're trying to work out if it's a vowel on one side, it has a even number on the other side, which 2 cards would you turn over? So I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. Okay, you got it. So a vowel on one side, even number on the other. So what I'm going to do is just quickly go this stop share. So I want to see you all. Okay, it was A, Q, 4, and 7. That was the 4 of them. Right, who would turn over the A? Put up your hand. You're allowed to pick 2, by the way. So we're going to vote. Who's going to turn over A? Oh, right, I'd say about 15% of people. Okay, who would turn over the, just move this so I can see my cards. Who would turn over the Q? Okay, who would turn over the 4? Who would turn over the 7? Right. What I want to tell you guys is this. What you're trying to do here, if you're trying to determine if that hypothesis is false, that is, if there's a vowel on one side, there is an even on the other, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to find an example where you have a vowel on one side and not an even number on the other. So for that reason, the 2 cards that will enable you to, let me just quick go back, share. The 2 cards that will enable you to determine that is in fact A and 7. They're the 2 that you want to turn over. See, what we do is that we get so used to thinking in a way that we want to confirm what we think is right, that we start looking, what are the 2 cards that will have a vowel on one side and a 2 even number on the other, and we turn those 2 over to see if it's true. That is just confirmation bias in action. What we should be doing is trying to look for evidence that it's not true. And that's an important thing, because I think that too often that as Christians, we spend our time just trying to confirm everything we believe is right, then rather being say, is there any evidence out there that what we believe is wrong? So it's an interesting thought process to go down. What I know, I've talked before a little bit about grit. Grit's the idea of having passion and perseverance. What I want to say to you in COVID times, as you're making decisions that are influenced by our Christian faith, that we ought to have a form of spiritual grit. What we want to do is that we want to be able to examine our inputs and think critically. All this takes effort. And even when it's going, life is hard, we need to learn to persevere. What I want to do is finish with the idea of a story that comes out of Genesis. This is actually a photo which I just grabbed off the net, which is we have Jacob, who is traveling through the western bank of Israel, and he's fleeing from Laban's house, and he's heading to meet his brother Esau, who he duped out of his birthright. And this is Jabbok, a place where Jacob finds himself knowing that Esau is only a day away, and he's very unsure of the reception he's going to get from Esau because he stole Esau's birthright. When we pick up the story, Jacob is actually all alone, isolated, with a very uncertain future. Let's pick up reading in Genesis. That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons and crossed the ford at Jabbok. After he sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Now get your heads around this. Here's Jacob. He is so unsure about what's about to happen when he meets Esau that he actually sends his whole family and all his possessions across the creek and tells them to all go away and take a different route in case this doesn't end well for him. And he then crosses back over the river. He's in the camp all by himself now, knowing he's going to meet Esau the next day, when this stranger appears and starts to attack him. It says that they wrestled till daybreak. Now, I don't know about you, but I reckon if I wrestled for 5 minutes, I'd probably be had enough. But Jacob wrestled until daybreak. We pick up the story that says, when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man says, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." And guys, I want you to know is that in many respects, this is a pretty weird story. And certainly when you read the commentaries about this, there is quite divided opinion as to who the mystery person that Jacob wrestled is. It seems that, after looking into a bit, there's 3 options really. And option 1 would be it was God in human form. Option 2 would be it was an angel. And option 3 would be it was, in actual fact, the devil in human form. Now, when you read in the book Hosea, Hosea actually describes this incident and infers that it was God's angel who Jacob was wrestling with. But it's going to make you wonder, why did an angel or God's representative wrestle with Jacob through the night as a supernatural being, where when it was coming to daybreak, he finally said, "Right, enough's enough." And he just touched his hip and dislocated his hip. And that stopped the whole thing. Why didn't he do it earlier? Why wait hours? I think as we think about that, one of the conclusions, and I really would encourage you to read into this story, because it just shows you, like, I've read the Bible through. I tend to read the Bible through every year. But how often do we just stop and dwell on some of these stories and say, what is actually going on here? See, for me, I think there was something special here, that God came down and met Jacob where he was at a time where he was very vulnerable. And what he was saying was, Jacob, I need you on board with me. I need you to be a follower of me. And what happened is that there was actually a physical wrestling going on, as well as an emotional and spiritual one for Jacob's future. Now, in that process, you look at Jacob fighting supernatural beings, and you got to say to the guy, even when the guy dislocated his hip, he said, "I am not letting you go until you bless me. I am not." And then finally, the angel turned around and gave him his blessing and changed his name to Israel, because he'd struggled with God and with humans and had overcome. Now, guys, this is one of the most powerful stories I think you see in the Bible of perseverance against the odds. And that's the sort of quality, as I think about it, that even amongst COVID, where life is unsure, even when we're not sure what's going on, as we start wanting our Christian faith to have traction, I think what we've got to do is to learn to persevere like Jacob, learn to actually meet God and even wrestle with God, things that we don't understand. Think critically, seek truth. And when we look in that verse in Romans, to come back to it, don't be like the people of this world, but let God change the way you think. Then you will know how to do everything that is good and pleasing to him. You know, truth is important. In the Bible,